thank everybody for being here, and we want to call this meeting to order. It is 6 o'clock. I guess do you want to go ahead and call roll, please?
Sure. Inglesby,
Here?
Mitchell,
Here.
Tobias,
Here.
Heiser, Flores Kale,
Here.
Zuniga, Bradshaw, Parsley.
Okay. The next item is approval of the minutes. If y'all have had an opportunity to review, I'd entertain a motion.
Commissioner, I'd like to go ahead and make a motion to approve the TIRZ Board minutes for April 13th, 2023.
Okay, there is a motion and a second. Are there any comments? If not, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, motion passes. Next is under presentations, the financial update on the City of Kyle, Texas Tax Increment Revenue Bonds, Series 2023 bond sale. Who's going to do that?
I'll go ahead and take
Okay.
that. Andrew Friedman with Samco Capital Markets, financial advisor to the city. Handed out two pieces of paper. The one we're talking about for this item is this single page, had a great pricing result. It was approved by council on Tuesday night. Wanted to go over, for the benefit of this board, the pricing decision that was made as we started working with the bond underwriter late last week and getting indications of interest rates. The top portion of this shows three columns: the original structure, the preliminary pricing based on a premium structure, and then the final pricing based upon a discount structure. And what I want to point out for all of you is the original structure being when we went out planning to go into the market to issue $8 million worth of bonds, put $8 million into the construction account, construction fund deposit, net of the cost of issuance and underwriter discount, by generating a premium of $395,000. And we assumed a true interest cost, which means roughly the average interest rate of 5.5%. In visiting with the underwriters, came to the determination that going into the market with a premium bond structure, which would keep the par amount at or below $8 million, was going to result in a higher interest rate on average than we could get if we went with a discounted bond structure, meaning that we would issue more par amount of bonds, both scenarios putting $8 million in the project fund, but the discount bond structure resulting in a lower true interest cost. So if you look at the middle column and the column to the right, that the premium structure would generate an interest rate of 4.8% versus that discount structure at 4.55%. An average annual debt service of $523,000, almost $524,000 versus $506,000 in average debt service. And it was our recommendation that we proceed with that discount bond structure. Even though you're issuing $8,265,000 in bonds, because we're able to get better interest rates by issuing bonds at a discount, meaning that in the latter years, the coupon that we pay as the city to the bond investor is lower than the yield in there. So ultimately, it's a roughly $20,000 a year savings on debt service and over roughly $500,000 in interest saved over the course the life of that bond. In both cases, much better than what we've been planning on. We try to be conservative going into a bond sale. We assumed 5.5% interest rate. Markets have improved since we really started looking at this, and we locked in that 4.55%. And instead of a $565,000 payment, down to $506,000. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions or concerns that you all have, but the pricing went very, very well. And we've got the money that we're saving by these lower payments can be committed on future bond sales through the TIRZ if and when that becomes a need.
Are there any comments?
So how many years is the payment?
The bond payments, that's the bottom half of the page. Looking at that amortization schedule, goes out to 2053.
So, I mean, I can do quick math, but is it like 20 years?
It's
30 years?
29 years.
29 years. Jeez. I mean, I get it. It's kind of disheartening to see double, that essentially is what we're going to pay, because it looks like there'll be interest of $7.1 million, almost 7.2. But I understand it's not a good time for bonds, even at a 4.5%, it's higher than, say 5 years ago or whatever. And we're never gonna go back, but, at the last council meeting, I went home and I was talking to my husband and I was like, well, they're saying these bonds are selling like crazy. He said, of course, because those rates are a little bit higher than normal. So what that means for the city is that that's what we're paying. And so that the person purchasing is gonna get more back for their money.
Correct. And certainly the last few years, we've seen kind of an anomaly with interest rates really being lower than, I would say, is healthy for the overall economy. On a historical basis, meaning looking back 20, 30 years and beyond, locking in interest rates for 30 years at 4.55% is very good. If you look at the yield curve overall, meaning what you go out and buy a one-year CD, and the city's investment portfolio is reflecting this, they're getting 5% borrowing money at 1 year, and it's relatively flat yield curve right now because we're at 4.55% out 30 years. So while interest rates are higher than they have been, I would say they're still very low compared to a historical norm.
The question I have is that we do have it for a 30-year. That I guess a lot of it has to do with the market, to where we would be able to eventually get it at a lower rate.
Certainly.
Do you think it's because that we have it out so long, the 30-year plan, that we have it at this percentage right here? If, just saying that if they ever decide, future councils decide to go with a 25-year plan, how would that affect the bond rating and then also the percentages?
So the bond rating will be unaffected, and our bond rating came in at that BBB plus category. The rating agency didn't take exception to the length of the borrowing. It took exception, or takes exception to, the concentration of taxpayers, meaning there's, I think 70% roughly of the top 10 taxpayers represent the entire value of the district. So there's a concentration of risk that as we get built out, as those homes are built out, you've got now lots of single family, et cetera, that are paying those property taxes. That's going to drive that credit rating up, and that'll drive the borrowing cost down, all things being equal over time. Relative to, so that 30-year doesn't impact the credit rating. Certainly the longer you go out, generally speaking, you're going to pay a higher interest rate. The difference in interest rate between 20 years and 30 years is not insignificant. The rates are not a great deal more than that 4.5, or there wouldn't be a great deal less than that 4.55% that we're locking in. But you are paying interest over that additional 10 years. So those dollars do add up. These bonds, just like all of our other outstanding bonds, will be callable 10 years from now. So to the extent there's either lower prevailing interest rates 10 years from now, or there's a surplus of money in the TIRZ, this debt could be either refinanced or bought down.
Yeah,
So that'll be a future
that's
decision.
exactly kind of what I was looking at, because by the statistics of, like with the school district and their bond, and of how many more students they're looking in the next couple of years, we're gonna be pushing 30,000 students in our area. So imagine the families that come along with the businesses. So when it comes to this area, years from now, where we're like saying, hey, we're generating a lot more money, double than what we have, is there a way that if future councils, years from now, would come back and say, let's go ahead and knock the 30-year off and make it 25 to where we can pay it off quicker? But again, I understand that we'd have to see where we're at as far as at the market at that time, because we can't say, well, we're gonna get it at this lower percentage. But if we are paying double on it, like, you're making that extra car payment, would that benefit us in the long run to where we could be able to pay this off quicker?
We, that council, 10 years from now, will certainly have that decision to make.
Okay.
Whether to buy down the bonds, make them go away by paying off the investor at par without a penalty, or refinance them at lower rates,
Yeah.
shorten that maturity up. Just have to see how things play out.
Yeah.
And certainly it'll be a decision for this board and
This-
city council.
It's a matter of paying years of interest versus saying we could pay it off quicker, but then there's that penalty.
Sure.
For paying off quicker, which is.
But there's
we- we
not a
better.
penalty for paying it off earlier, but we cannot take them from the investor. They're protected up to that call option 10 years from now.
Okay. Continue. Thank you very
Mark
much.
the calendar.
Mark the calendar. Thank you.
Any other comments? Is there anything else, Andrew, that you needed to review or wanted to review?
No, ma'am.
regarding
Happy to
this?
answer just any questions that you all have.
Okay, and it doesn't look like there's any action to be taken on this, okay. If there's nothing else, we'll move on. And I failed to ask for citizen comments. Is there anybody that, who has signed up or that would like to speak under citizen comment?
I think we're good.
And if not, okay, then we'll move on. We're gonna move around just a little bit, under, 5. We're gonna go to number 7, discussion and possible action regarding the TIRZ 2 FY 2023-24 budget. Who's gonna lead that discussion?
So who creates that budget?
Well, Beth and I have been discussing the budget for quite a while, and understand the county's desire to not have any of the TIRZ money that they're contributing going towards M&O, and we're accounting for that in our budget. We're also really scrubbing the budget, making as much room for additional debt service as we can. We're in the very beginnings of developing that budget, but if you have any specific questions about that, or the development of it, or any direction to give us in the development of it, we're here to accept that.
Yeah, I think one of the comments that was made, because we are involved with so many other TIRZs, the city of San Marcos wanted us to pay for employees, and we felt that if that was something that the city wanted to do, is to hire employees for any kind of maintenance and operation of the area, then, that was something that was probably the responsibility of the city. And so we probably would prefer that no employees be paid. Now, we do have a pilot program. There are a couple of part-timers that we're paying right now. And so this will be the second year, but after that, I think it's pretty clear that, we really don't believe that we should be paying for employees, actually.
We currently have no employees in the budget. We do have 3 contracts for landscaping and maintenance of the park, but no city employees are funded out of the
Okay.
fund.
So that was, I think the bigger concern is the employees.
That you covered.
So I think we'll probably have to have a budget be adopted at some point. And I'm not sure if that will coincide with the next fiscal year. So that might be something where we could have a preliminary budget at our next meeting to adopt. This is our first TIRZ that has a budget that has to be adopted, because we've never had a TIRZ quite like this. And so, but strategically, as has been said, I think the plan is for the city's contribution to be used for capital projects, and then the county's contribution to be used for a combination of those contracts that we're discussing, as well as there's a little bit of legal fees associated with the TIRZ and some small items, and then also to help bring cash funding to the city so that can be used to cash fund additional projects, because that's the county's been more receptive to that kind of a strategy. So I just wanted to make sure that we're all sort of in agreement about how the budget is being set up. But I do think that we ought to give direction and to actually bring back a formal budget to adopt.
So would this be a budget that we bring forward for the TIRZ to finally say, okay, this is how much the maintenance is gonna cost, this is for any road repairs, and this is what the county is, are we going to be saying, this county, you're gonna be having this percentage of it, or city's gonna be in charge of it, and then when we do, we're gonna actually have, not contractors, but we're gonna have city employees that would handle that? Is it, I'm just trying to,
So-
like, I know this is brand new. This will be
Yeah.
a grassroots, budget for this TIRZ.
Well,
Getting an understanding of the
the revenue
steps.
and the expense side aren't gonna be connected, like this is the city's revenue and the city's expense, this is the county's revenue and the county. It's just a total revenue line.
Okay.
Broken down by city and county. And then there's a total expense line that has debt service and O and M and which is where the contracts and
CIP
things come
on it.
through.
Okay.
So, but we need to make sure that we do not allow our O and M to exceed the amount that the county is contributing. And in fact, it should be maybe half of what the county is contributing.
Yeah.
So that the rest can be cash reserves that are coming in to fund projects like upgrade a light pole or something, or a parking lot. We're gonna discuss two projects potentially here in just a minute.
Okay.
That one of them we might have the ability to cash fund. So, but then the city's revenues portion, that's the amount that as they're doing their pro formas, which again, we're gonna discuss in just a second, they're looking at the city's portion, which is bondable. So strategically, especially for the next 3 years, because we have the ability to issue full TIRZ revenue bonds for the next 3 years, we look at those cash flows and try to prepare projects that we need to be putting in line, but it cannot exceed the city's revenue. And we also don't want to cannibalize the city's revenue because the city's revenue has the ability to be leveraged into larger projects.
And we'll be able to make sure that the county has an idea of where their funding is. So that way, in years to come, if, let's just say, another city like Buda or San Marcos wants to kind of model something like this, they have an idea of like, well, this is how Kyle is doing their budget. And this is how it works, to where other taxpayers can kind of see it from there to see where, how the county's contributing to
Yes.
our city.
I just think that it's generally a good practice when you're creating a TIRZ that where the revenues aren't going back into a development deal, but where the revenues are sitting in an account that we get to use, that we should have a formal budget that we adopt.
Yeah.
So that's really what I'm trying to make sure that we do here.
I agree with that, sorry, go ahead.
Are you making a motion?
I'd like to make a motion to direct staff to bring back a formal budget for TIRZ number 2, and to have that budget process line up with the city's budget.
Second. I would like to ask if the county could be involved in those meetings, either virtually or like in person. That way, when they come, they're not just reading paper, but they actually get input on how they would like to see that money spent as well, if that's possible.
And I was gonna just say, Jerry, as y'all are developing that budget, maybe you can, before it's presented for any kind of a motion to this board, that you give us time to just take a look at it, and that way, if there's any concerns on our commissioners' court, then we can make sure that we're addressing those prior to any kind of formal adoption.
Sure, we could do that, or we can also schedule budget meetings for the TIRZ Board as we go through the development process, very similar to what we do with the city council.
Okay. Sounds good.
That's how I see it happening. So the thought of it being a part of our budgeting cycle would mean that we would have meetings ahead of when we were adopting to go over in very draft workshop format so that we can all discuss without action being taken, almost, and, maybe even a public hearing on it.
Correct.
So this will be yearly?
Yes, it should
Okay,
be.
Yearly,
I
so
think
a yearly city budget along with TIRZ 2, so we can combine them. together.
Yes.
Okay. All right. So there is a motion and a second to direct staff to bring back recommendations regarding the budget. And is there any other discussion? If not, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, motion carries. Next item is number 6, discussion and possible action for issuing RFQ for intersection improvements at Kohler and Sanders, Benner and Cromwell, as well as pedestrian and lighting improvements along Kohlers.
Do you want me to start? So the thinking here, first of all, this, and Samco can present this more. The $8 million bond that we issued only consumed about 35 to 40% of the cash flows that the city is bringing forward in the current year, and those over the next 3 years are going to grow. So I've asked Samco to put together a sense of how much bonding capacity do we still have, and also what projects are on the ground, and what do we expect the bonding capacity to be by the time the TIRZ is past the point of being able to issue 30-year TIRZ revenue bonds without seeking an extension, so that we have just a sense of what our projects' dollars could be. And so they've shown here, and I'm on the wide sheet on line 8, that we could potentially issue a Series 2024 TIRZ revenue bond of $15,300,000, and then an additional Series 2026 TIRZ revenue bond of $14,900,000, and then they're showing a 2028 revenue series potential for $7 million, but I don't know if that is amortized at 29 years or 28 years. Did y'all amortize it to the end to match it?
To the end of the TIRZ.
To the end of the TIRZ.
Yeah.
Okay, so there's kind of a sense, these are preliminary, but it's a sense. The H line is gonna be pretty accurate, because that's projects that are on the ground and cash flows that are already being received. But the I line and the J line are estimates of what could take place. And so it's, for some time now, I've been trying to figure out, for myself, what projects I think are important. I do think that it is important for us to consider utilizing these cash flows to leverage into projects. And there have been 3. This is what we discussed at the last time. 1 is the potential for structured parking. 2 is the potential for roundabouts at Kohlers and Sanders, Benner, and Cromwell. And then the 3rd is a potential for surface parking by La Verde. But the surface parking project, which is the next item up, that's something that I think Leon is prepared to talk to, and we can discuss. It may not be a situation where we have to issue any bonds for that at all. But the capacity that we have currently will be very close to sufficient, may be fully sufficient, to fully engineer the roundabouts with a focus on pedestrian crossings across Kohlers on all 3 of those sections, and then the pedestrian underpass underneath Benner, as well as sidewalks and lighting along Kohlers to allow for people to, pedestrians, because the idea is that at the brick and mortar district, we want it to be dense, but we also want it to be focused on pedestrian mobility and safety. So what I wanted to propose was that we issue an RFQ which means that there's no money it's just going out and soliciting for bids and to see about hiring a firm who could potentially design and prepare and start this potential project. And then there have been discussions about doing a structured parking deal. That structured parking deal is not quite right yet, because I feel like it's probably prudent for us to partner with a private developer who is intending to build a commercial project, and then at that time we could develop a structured parking proposal, which is where the Series 2026 and 2028 bonds might come in play. That would be in concert with a private entity.
So your idea when it comes to the parking, the structured parking, that if we have a developer that comes in, or that could be able to help finance that through a DA?
Yeah, so it would be
And then that way we don't have to use TIRZ money for that parking situation there, or for the structure itself.
So we're building the retail roads. That's what this current bond is. So it's gonna create hard corners within fully built out hard corners that's like 2 urban streets, so 20-foot sidewalks. That's what's gonna get constructed, in which case the type of development will be like wrap style, where the buildings with retail on the ground floor come right up to the sidewalks.
Yeah.
And then behind, if you have to surface park it, it's just a ton of surface parking. So if they would come in ready to build, then what we could potentially do is partner with them on a structured parking garage, where it would be, it'd be available for the public, so that they could come in and park and get out and shop at a variety of places, different places. but we don't want to build a structured parking and not have any buildings there. It just would exist all by itself. So I think that's coming, but it has to come, first the retail roads have to get constructed, then someone has to come in and want to do a private development, and then with that private development, there's opportunity for us to do a structured parking.
Kind of like the
deal.
Mueller concept,
Yes.
Yvonne, with the parking,
Except for the Mueller wasn't bonded out.
yeah, I understand.
So, and that's my concern.
But
is like, this is a lot of
that would be
money.
the kind of the concept
Yeah,
to.
I like the concept.
To assist with the parking, the future growth and the future parking situation ahead of time versus just laying asphalt out in a 5-acre area where we could, eventually we have to, start building up. You know, I know we have a 5-story limit, or we have a, cap. But if we were to look at that, I think that's kind of what you're kind of projecting or having the idea of when it comes to that specific structure itself as far as the parking.
Yeah, so, but what I'm suggesting is that the structured parking be our next, so basically we have 2 major CIPs left in this initial phase with these cash flows that we have. The first would be the intersection improvements along Kohlers, and then the second would be the structured parking on the backside of that. So we'd be looking at trying to prepare for structured parking deal in 2028 and preparing for intersection and pedestrian improvements on Kohlers in 2024.
Yeah, because I also look at it as a win for,
2026 is what I meant.
to possibly assist with the school district on that end, because going to my son's band concert, and some people were like having to park on the side of the road, it gets full. You have
Well,
to-
that's where that's
you know,
item number
it's-
5,
and So
actually.
that would be kind of the idea there to help with that for the future growth on that end.
Yeah, but it's gonna be a different parking lot, he's saying. That's,
Yeah.
what you're talking about is for number 5. And 6 would be for the retail.
Yeah.
Right, and we need to develop a plan for that. But
Yeah.
we need a developer at the table with us who's gonna, and then we can control use on the bottom, we can control more. We already can control use, but we can control it more by being a partner through a public-private partnership to build structured parking for the district. So TIRZ 2 funds have to be used to construct, if we're using TIRZ funds, they have to be for a public purpose, so it has to be for public infrastructure. So the parking lots have to be public in that way, yeah, but I would like to have feedback from the group on whether or not y'all think that going out to RFQ to start the engineering for the intersection improvements on Kohlers is a good project for us to pursue.
I wish we had more information on finance and what the numbers look like. Is it a good idea? I think it's a great idea. I think everything you presented is a great idea. That's a lot of money, and it seems like we're having to bond out for it. And so that makes me a little bit uncomfortable if we continuously bond out. We're looking at, 3 times in the next 5 years? That to me is, I think that's something that, I think would require the feedback of our new city manager, just to get a good idea of what he thinks. I just think that's a lot of bonding out. And what's the total bond out for those three years that we would bond out?
Right now, roughly $35 to $36 million, based upon the assumptions as to the taxable value growth within the TIRZ that we're modeling presently. And there could be more capacity than that, because we're assuming a 15% growth in the increment between now and 2027, and then 5% per year thereafter. This year, and they're preliminary still, that growth is 47%.
So if we have that growth in there, why don't we use that money instead of bonding out?
The reason that the TIRZ bonds or cities bond generally is it takes a long time to accumulate the amount of money to support these projects. So you'd be talking about deferring the construction of these road projects or structured parking until you've saved up enough in the savings account essentially to pay cash for that.
But
And so this
we
is
don't know
leveraging those TIRZ
you said it
dollars.
was a 47% increase. I don't know what that means money-wise.
If we want to look at this pro forma analysis, and I know there's a lot of numbers on here. Looking at the second column, that's the incremental value to TIRZ 2. So if you look at fiscal year 2024, which is what the preliminary taxable values that have just come out are in reference to, they've gone up to $650,000 in incremental value against a 57-cent city tax rate. That's bringing in $1,853,000 compared to the year before, $1,032,000. And so as you follow that incremental revenue from the city, and again, this is modeled out assuming 57-cent tax rate this next year, up to 59 cents in tax rate, because if you go back to the $300 million bond election we had, we're assuming we're going to take the tax rate up to that 59 cents. That's where that annual revenue from the TIRZ for the city is coming from. Now, there's the county's portion of the incremental revenue, but we're looking at TIRZ bonds. As we know, the county's revenues can't be pledged towards the repayment of the bonds, so we're not even looking at the county's revenues when it comes to what is our bonding capacity for this TIRZ.
But if we don't bond, we can include their money in the CIPs in that area. Is that correct?
Sure, it's all part of the budget.
So I guess my question would just be, can you just show us the difference between the bonding and then what it would look like if we had to save up? Just out of curiosity.
Sure, you'd be adding up columns D and column R to come up with that money. That's roughly, this next year, close to $3 million. And that's growing from $3 million this next year to maybe close to $5 million a year a few years from now. So it would take several years to come
For
up
the
with.
garage, but like, how much would it be for the roundabout?
I don't know what those cost, but if you're saving $3 million a year, in 10 years, you've got maybe, that $30 million in total, but that's not taking into consideration the various expenses of running the TIRZ, which are accounted for in columns M through, or it's summarized in column P.
And debt service on the bonds.
And,
that we
and,
just
and we've got the
issued.
debt service on the existing bonds that we've issued, so.
So would this also be part of the yearly budget that we would have to look at as well?
I'm sorry?
For us, would that have to, if we were to go this route, would this have to be something that we would have to bring up every budget year to see where we're at on our finances?
We would, but it's, the capacity is there. The process that we go through, it's a commitment to the projects. So we don't know the exact dollar amounts that all these things are gonna cost.
Yeah.
What we need to do is hire someone to begin schematics on it all, so that they can bring back proposals of this is what it will cost.
Okay.
And so that's what gets incorporated into the budget, over time. So the initial commitment, though, if you're thinking of a project that might cost 15 million, if it's a 10% is your soft cost on that, that's $1.5 million. So what we don't want to do is say, yes, we're going to do this, but we're going to cash fund it, and then we're going to design roundabouts that we cannot fund because we don't have enough cash that we can say, well, in 5 years' time, we can build one, kind of thing. So the capacity is there, and so to make the projects happen now, within the TIRZ, without being on the county's books, without being on the city's books. And so I personally think it's a very good and appropriate use of monies to make major intersection improvements that will benefit not just the people who are going into the district, but also all those who travel and walk from neighborhoods to the district.
So if we do the RFQ, that'll give us a price on those projects or just on the engineering department? Or
Right.
the engineering company that would build it? Which one is it? It just the engineers or for the projects?
No, it's not well, Leon, do you want to answer
Could
that?
we do an RFQ for the projects to see how much they cost?
They usually give an engineering estimate cost. That's my understanding.
Good evening, Leon Barber, City Engineer. Typically, when you do an RFQ, that's to select either an engineer, an architect, or a surveyor. Those are really the firms that you cannot ask them for a price. What you do is you go through the process to submit that RFQ. They give you their submittals. For example, we have 28 submittals in our office right now that we have to review, bring back to council. We're selecting our general civil rotation list. And 28 firms have submitted. We're going to review their proposals, and we're going to select the best one that meets the RFQ that we sent out. You could do that with this particular item, but you could focus mainly on the roundabouts and the infrastructure that you want to improve. So you could do a separate RFQ for that. You don't necessarily have to use our general civil. And we've done that before, where we just want to look at a specific project, and we want to select a firm that we know is really competent in that area. So once we get that RFQ out for advertisement, and then we get the submittals in, then we review those internally with the staff, and we come up with a score. And then we usually go with the highest firm that's on that score. And we bring that recommendation back to council for approval. And then we negotiate a contract. At that price, that's, we sign the contract with them, and then we tell them, okay, here's our project. This is what we want you to do. This is what we want you to look at designing. And with the first thing I usually ask them for is a preliminary engineering report. Take it up to about what we call 30% more or less, and I say, I need to know, make sure that you understand the scope of work, then tell me what you think the costs are going to be. So we get a little bit more detailed cost estimate from those firms. Usually, depending on the scope of work on that preliminary, something like this may cost $200,000, $300,000, $400,000, I don't know, without actually visiting with the firm to see what it's going to cost. So that would be the first step in this process, is to get that preliminary engineering report from a firm that we've said is the best qualified for this project. Does that help explain?
Yeah, can I ask why we wouldn't do the engineering ourselves, pay for that out of the TIRZ fund, and then take those engineering plans and then put those out for an RFP? Because right now, what we're doing is we're saying who's the most qualified, but that doesn't mean it's gonna be the best. I mean, I'm not trying to get a discount price, but what I'm saying is, we're just gonna go with the one, we don't know where they sit as far as the prices are, we just know the qualifications. But if we set out an RFP with the engineering plans, then we can get a price, and then, maybe we can figure out quality as well, even though this one is just for the price. So, I mean.
The RFQ is to select your engineer.
Right,
Eventually,
but we don't know how much they're gonna charge. That's what I'm saying, like, we're selecting the best of the best, and I get that.
Okay.
But that could cost the city a lot more.
there's no cost to go through that process.
Right, but since they don't have our engineering plans, we don't know how much they're gonna charge us for the engineering of these projects, right?
They will come up with an estimate for the cost of construction. They'll
So
come
my
up-
question would be, why wouldn't we do the engineering plans, which you said will cost probably a couple $100,000, and then put those plans out for an RFP?
That's what we typically do. You go out for construction. But remember, on the PER, I like to make sure that they're giving us exactly what we asked for. Because you can get a submittal from a proposal from an engineer to do the whole project from beginning to end.
So are these
So the
gonna
price
be
is going to be
like
more.
project oversight people? Is that what we're doing? Like, they're not gonna be the actual engineer? I'm confused.
Yes, they will be the engineer. They will design it from the beginning to the end. They will also provide contract administration. So we could get a proposal for them to do the whole thing. Now you're looking at quite a bit
gotcha.
more
Okay.
money.
I
I
got
like
you.
to do the PER because I want to make sure, it does slow the process down, I know that. But at least I know, yes, this is exactly what we want. No, we don't like that. Let's change this. Let's move it a different direction. And so they'll modify the plans as they move forward to the completion of their design. At
Got
that
it.
point, we go out for bids with the contractor.
Okay,
But in the meantime, we get better and better cost estimates as we go through the process. If we go 30, 60, 90 like it's traditionally done, at 60 we get a new cost estimate, and 90 we get a new cost estimate, and at 100% we get as good an estimate as we can get at that point in time.
okay. I got it.
I'd like to make a motion to issue an RFQ for intersection improvements at Kohlers and Sanders and Benner and Cromwell, as well as the pedestrian crossings and lighting improvements along Kohlers Crossing.
Okay. Got a motion? Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. There's a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion?
I'd like to see if I could get maybe Pervez to just come up to see how he feels about the concept of what we're trying to do, just to get your opinion, sir. I like to get everybody's, the Godfather's opinions.
Madam Chair and board members, good evening. I'm Pervez Mohit, for the record, City's Director of Finance. The projections you have before you is the first time I'm seeing as you are. I have seen projections before from Samco, and they do a good job. But it all depends on the assumptions in the model. So I really can't tell you without digging deep into it, but just at the surface level, based on their assumption, is fairly reasonable.
Okay.
And if they're saying we can meet it based on those assumptions, then I'll accept.
Thank you.
Any other discussion or questions? Okay. If not, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Nay.
Okay. Okay, we'll go ahead and open number 5, discussion and possible action regarding the construction of the parking lot for La Verde.
Board members,
Already.
Jerry Hendricks, interim city manager, for the record.
You know.
There is a lot just south of the park that's almost finished, we hope, that at some point will be developed as a retail center, but for the foreseeable future, it's available to build a parking lot. We feel that parking lot's going to be needed as we start programming La Verde Park. There's currently no place for visitors to park. So we've looked at that lot before. We've talked about it over the past couple of days. We think we can do that lot internally with our own staff for $300,000 to $500,000. So we're prepared to explore that further if that's the wish of the board. We think that's about 300 parking spaces.
Is this gonna be just a one level? Or are you
Yeah,
gonna do a garage?
since it's basically temporary, and it may be temporary for 5 to 10 years, but it'd be a basic cut and dry parking lot, but it will serve the district for the time being.
Is this gonna also service the retail in that area?
Yes.
I would say a garage. To me, it makes more sense if you're gonna do something, just, I think that's where the garage needs to be, and if that's gonna also support the retail, it makes more sense to me than do a temporary parking lot that's gonna cost $500,000.
We can come back with a tighter proposal once we really get into it, but that's where we are right now. The parking garage is years away and millions of dollars, so it's up, whatever the board desires us to do.
By chance, Jerry, would you happen to have a map of the actual section or part of where this proposed parking lot would be? Is it on the side of ARC, or is it going to be on the opposite side of the pack where the Heroes
So
Memorial?
if you're standing on La Verde Park, looking south towards Colors, that's where the parking lot will be.
Okay, that open field?
Yes.
How many acres is that?
I don't know, Leon, do you know?
I was gonna try to send this to you, Amber, see if you can forward it to.
I do feel like there is an immediate need for the parking lot, but I also agree with you, it would be a great place for a parking garage.
It's neutral, I feel like everybody can use it then. I mean, everyone can use it in the other, in item number 6, but I just feel like if you're gonna use it for retail and La Verde, it's a little more justified to spend the money in that area. And even if you wanna start with that, I think the parking, as we see downtown and all of Kyle is kind of a mess. So if we could just start that area off on the right foot, I think that would be the best investment we could do.
I think that by putting in a temporary lot, we can actually probably ignite some more interest in that area from retail, from a retail perspective, as opposed to waiting and going through the process. I have no idea how long it takes to build a parking garage, but I would imagine it's probably
Could we
pretty lengthy.
engineer it like that's gonna be the parking, and then that way it's the beginning of it, the garage parking? Does that make sense? Like, if I was gonna build a garage parking lot, what do I want
I mean, it would be a lot of subsurface work
Yeah.
that would have to go into that.
It would be a much more involved engineering project, just the design.
Hey, Jerry, are we, this parking lot by the park, this is something we're talking about a temporary surface parking or a covered parking garage. Is that correct?
It would
Those
not
are the
be
two
covered.
options we're discussing right now?
It'd be an asphalt parking lot.
That's,
That's what's on the
that would be
agenda.
option number one. Okay. So I'd like to make a motion for staff to put together a cost analysis on temporary surface level parking lot at La Verde Park. On Everett Street.
Okay, there's a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, there's a motion and a second. Is there any additional discussion or questions?
I think that we should move forward with going ahead and green lighting this. We've already started on it. We've already cleared it. It's already been in the works.
So how's that gonna, will that conflict with the structured parking garage that we've contemplated?
The structured parking garage, there's like 2 or 3 different places where it could go, but we're only gonna have the ability to fund one
So
initially.
are we now
And this would
looking,
be the third of that, you know, it wouldn't be the where you'd wanna start with your first structured parking.
okay, so we're looking at 3 in total?
What's that?
Over the course of time, we're looking at 3 in total?
Well, we're
Is
gonna
that-
have to figure that out. I mean, there's no magic marker. But this would allow for, if we went forward with this would allow for, parking at La Verde. When it opens, there's not gonna be the ability to park there, very much. There's just the parallel parking along that street, because
Yeah.
the rest of the infrastructure is not built out to it yet. And it would also allow for parking to the restaurant and retail sites that are being developed right now. So the developers will tell you that if you're trying to partner with a private entity to construct a garage plus retail, that's gonna happen at the center of the 2 main roads that we're constructing, not here behind the pack. So there's not gonna be a situation where in this next series of bonds that we're considering, that it's gonna go to this site. So that's why Jerry's talking about putting something on the ground now for the next 5 or so years until we get to a place where we could be building multiple other garages outside of that first one.
So what would we need in order to complete this action to move this forward, Jerry? How far along are we in the process?
We're just barely getting started, but with your action, we would move forward in a more formal fashion. We would bring back to the board, if they desire, the actual plan and more approximate cost.
Included in his motion?
Yes.
Is how you would take that? Well, that's good enough then, so. But we would just wanna have it by the next meeting if we could.
We'll have
You
it.
think you could?
Do you want me to amend my motion?
No, I think we're.
We understand.
Okay.
Could it also maybe look at the concept and design of it
Yeah,
as
we'll
well?
bring all
Yes.
that back.
All that,
Well,
okay.
I think.
I just want to make sure that, if we're gonna bring this forward,
Yes.
it's not like, okay, here's the plan, how much it's gonna cost, and we're gonna be throwing some gravel and asphalt, and this is what's gonna look like with just a couple of poles of lights.
That's exactly.
You know
my
what I'm
thought.
saying?
Yes,
It's
so-
like, if we're going to make this investment, because again, we've talked about it, even we talked about it when we were bringing Heroes Memorial, 2 years ago, how important the visual is on this and the need for it.
So,
Like Ms.
the
Bradshaw
only
was
thing I
saying.
would ask is for staff to bring back some options for a lower end, and then assuming maybe that it could be there for 10 years, like with stand-up curbs and, maybe, landscaping
Sure,
as well.
we're assuming that there's no curb and gutter with this project, and we're not assuming at this point no lighting. But we can bring back those options
Yes.
as well.
Yes, because I think we're gonna have the ability to cash fund any of those options. So it would be good for us to at least have a look at, this is what 300,000 gets, this is what 500,000 gets,
And we'll bring,
this is what a million gets.
we'll also bring back our ability to, how much we'll be able to cash fund.
Okay.
Will you bring back a map too?
Sure,
Be
we'll.
nice to see where it's gonna be.
And just for clarification, this would be done by the city crew?
Correct.
Road department? Okay. Did you get your question answered?
Yeah, I
Commissioner?
didn't, do we know what the acreage is?
Yes, let me explain that. I couldn't apparently share the map that I have, but this tract that you're looking at, there's 3 parcels there. The north parcel, I'm gonna call it the northern tract, is about 1.6 acres. There's also, usually we call it a spite strip. It's really just a strip of land about 75 feet by 180 feet wide that's owned by the Plum Creek Group, I believe. The southern tract is owned by the school district. That's about 1.6 acres also. So the design dilemma will be that on the north half, we have drainage kind of figured out on that already. There's a piping that's going to be there as part of that road project that's being designed right now. So I'm not too concerned about the drainage on that one. The south side has, if we add additional impervious cover, that goes to the Performing Arts Center pond. That pond was never designed for a 100-year event, much less the Atlas 14. So I'm concerned about taking extra drainage to that. So I would recommend that we just do the 1.6 acres on the north side. That can get you roughly about 200 parking spaces.
Okay, then that would be the dilemma then, because, well, okay, of course, it's gonna be used for us, but I'm also looking at partnering with the school district.
Well-
And you see where it's be like, okay, and I was there last night, and you have to wait for other schools to perform their students and leave before you can come in and park anywhere. And so I'm looking at that, but then of course, you're also looking at a retail to where, are we gonna build just half of it, and then then there's gonna be another open, another half acre of land that's just gonna sit there? And until since it's owned by the school district, would they wanna contribute to adding on to that? Or also we have the Plum Creek Refuge, individuals that own that, what say they might have on us building something like this as well?
So, yeah, I think we should look at partnering with the school district. If they have additional sites, it's just a shared use agreement. So, is that what you're talking about?
There's the spite strip that I mentioned.
No,
The southern half is a school district. That's apparently owned by the school district.
right, so,
Yes,
but
sir.
what we did with the regular Hayes parking is that now, in order for folks to go to our park, they're parking on the Hayes School District's parking site. So we did a joint use agreement with them,
Yep.
Okay.
whereby the parking for Heroes Memorial Park is the PAX parking. And it worked out, and that's part of the contract. We maintain that now, but it's a good, combined use. So if they own that site, their contribution could be the land, then the TIRZ could contribute, which is the city and the county, to construct the parking, and then the TIRZ could also have, extend our contracts to maintain that, as well. So I'm very confident that they would want to do that, because it's in their best interest. and it
We'll
works
look
out
at
for
all
everyone.
three of those
And then we
pieces
would
of
add
land.
even more parking, so that we could have enough, because if we have an event at La Verde that has 1,000 people there, we're gonna need all the parking that we,
Yeah.
and so it requires cooperation with the school district.
Right, and we'll bring back a plan for each of those three lots, and then all of them combined, we'll have to address the drainage. So how much time do you think we're gonna need for that, Leon?
We're going to have to talk to Myra Gepp with Plum Creek, because they have that strip in the middle. We need to see how they're going to commit to helping us with that. I think we need at least 2-3 weeks to get this together. There's a lot of things that we're going to have to look at.
All right, so if you can give us at least a month.
Okay. As long as we have all the parties involved in the conversations, the school district, also the Plum Creek folks, so that way nobody's also caught off guard, but also see the overall goal of why we're looking at this parking, and then seeing to where we can collaborate if we could, and then that way it benefits everybody in the end, and the county.
Correct, this project will benefit all three of those parties.
Okay, any other discussion? Okay, if not, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Okay, we'll go on to item number, do you have a preference, Mayor, 3 or 4? 4. Adopt a board seal.
So I brought a sample. The board has, do I have a sample? I thought that this was the seal. Did they give me? So the board's never adopted a board seal. And for all of our bond documents, we like to have a board seal. So if you guys just want to take a look, if anyone has any differing suggestions. It's very basic. But it has a seal and has the name of the TIRZ in the city of Kyle. And so that's what we would propose.
Can we put Kyle in the middle of the star?
It's a seal, I like it.
I'd like to make a
there
motion to
is.
approve the seal that has been presented to us by Ms. Libby.
Second.
Okay, there's a motion and a second. Any discussion? If not, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, great.
Okay, and we'll order it and then send it to Jennifer when it comes in.
Okay, so we'll go back to item number 3, discussion regarding scheduling the next meeting. Do we have any dates available or suggestions?
So June.
Maybe the 22nd?
It's close to the workshop. Right?
Yeah.
Can we do the
I can't-
15th?
I can't do the 15th.
No, okay, so we have the 8th? And then the 29th?
I can do the 29th to the 22nd.
I mean,
Houston on 29.
let's do the 22nd.
Okay, June 22nd.
That gives Leon that month, would that help, sir?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
All righty. Is there any need to go into executive session? Okay, I don't believe so. And I guess our next item is a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Okay. I didn't make that motion, but
Toss it.
I mean, maybe,
Keep it with
I
your
just
file.
used yours,
The
right?
TIRZ file.